Hi, I'm Doris Sims, the succession consultant, and today we're going to talk about succession planning from backup plan to building a foundation for success. Today's topics will refer to talent bench strength and succession concepts. What do they all really mean? There's a lot of confusion about all the different talent management strategies and concepts out there. And we'll talk about how to explain the business need for talent and succession management to our business leaders. And we'll talk about talent bench strength and succession tools. First of all, let's talk about why do you keep hearing about talent issues? It's talent management this and talent management that. Well, all around the world we have a growing retirement population, and then we have a lot of emerging talent in the world, but they don't have all the skills and knowledge needed to move into the roles that we will need in the coming months and years. So it's all about how do we prepare these people for these positions. Our organizations are also flatter with fewer development steps. So sometimes people need to take large jumps in their career and they need to be ready for those career moves. We also have changing expectations about what the organization should do for emerging talent to develop and move in their career, and an increase in top employees starting their own businesses. We also have a lot of global population changes, changes in how people view their organization that they work for, changes in how willing people are to relocate, and changes in the ages and the different generations of people in the workforce. We also have an expanding need for top talent for the competitive edge in the organization, and the costs of external recruiting keep going up, and the cost of talent turnover is also excessive. So as all these talent forces continue to grow, we need more a talent bench strength strategy. So, what do I mean by talent bench strength? First of all, I use the phrase talent bench strength to refer specifically to the activities going on inside the organization to identify and develop talent and to identify and develop successors. So, I'm not referring to external recruiting at all, which is also an important talent strategy, but just not part of the internal talent bench strength strategy, although the two strategies do need to be connected together, of course. So, when we're talking about talent bench strength, we're talking about building and maintaining a strong talent bench strength strategy as a proactive way to protect the company from talent loss and to identify talent resources that we're going to need to achieve our future business goals. So rather than hoping that everything magically is going to happen, where people just fall into place in the right career and the company has the right talent at the right time, we actually need to plan that. We need to talk about it and take action around it, just as business leaders do for every other business function in the organization. We don't leave anything else to chance. So why would we leave our talent resources to chance? So it's a proactive strategy. Additionally, a talent bench strength strategy is designed to retain high performing people and high potential employees by actively developing their competencies and their career path options. This slide talks about the fact that we have many important and solid business functions in the organization like budgeting and risk management and business development. And it talks about how those same business processes pertain to the talent bench strength strategy. So for example, we need a good budget process in order to identify our financial resources that will be needed to achieve our future goals. And we also need a good talent review process to identify top talent to achieve the goals. These two processes are really very similar. The only difference is one is about money and one is about people. We also need a risk management plan to mitigate and prevent business losses, and we need succession management as a risk management function about talent. So just like we want to reduce the risks of other business issues in the organization, succession management is really a risk management function designed to prevent talent losses and to plan for talent losses when they do occur. And while we must continually focus on business development so we can remain competitive, we also must focus on talent development to stay competitive. And successful organizations not only focus diligently on reviewing and developing their financial strength, they also focus diligently on reviewing and developing their talent bench strength. So, what does a strong talent bench strength culture look like? So, on the left side of this screen, we have several examples of what does it look like when an organization has a strong talent bench strength strategy. And I'm not going to go through all of these because you can print and read them, but it has to do on the left-hand side with discussing talent regularly and identifying and developing successors, encouraging loyalty, moving people around in the organization, filling more leadership positions internally versus externally, and rewarding leaders and employees and holding them accountable as well for talent development, retention, and employee growth. So, three key talent bench strength actions include the talent review process, which is about proactively and regularly discussing, planning, and acting on talent needs for the ongoing employee and business performance and success. So, the key words here proactive and regularly. So, we're not just going to talk about our people one time, we need to discuss them on a regular basis, and we need to do it proactively so we have plans in place to identify and develop successors and top performing people. And then succession management is really a function in the talent bench strength strategy to reduce the risk of talent loss and to form retention and development plans to also reduce this risk. And then we have talent development, providing on the job learning experiences, career movements, as well as formal training resources to enhance the strengths of our employees and to address development gaps for our employees. So we have talent management, performance management, high potentials, high performers, value contributors, successors, key experts. There are so many terms that fall under this phrase of talent management or talent bench strength. So what do they all really mean? How would we define similarities and differences between each of these terms below? So it's important for us within the human resources communities that we can understand the differences and the similarities between these concepts, but also to explain them to business leaders. So first we'll take a look at talent management and performance management. How are they the same and how are they different? Well, first of all, both performance management and talent management are the same in that they're both designed to enhance the performance, the engagement level of our employees. The difference is performance management looks at past individual talent performance. So how well did each individual perform related to the goals and behaviors set out for them? Whereas a talent bench strength strategy is focusing on the future. What are our talent risks and how can we prevent talent loss? How can we plan for eventual talent loss? What will be the talent needs to achieve our future goals and how can we develop the qualifications of our people for our future needs? Here we have successors and high potentials. Now, both successors and high potentials should be high performing individuals. So the difference is successors are people who are identified for one or maybe more than one specific position. They are not necessarily interested in a lot of career movement. They may not be able to relocate. So their career mobility is more limited both in what they're able to do and what they aspire to do. Whereas high potentials are often identified as successors for multiple positions in the organization. They have a lot more flexibility to move around in the organization, and they demonstrate the desire and ability to move up and across into other job functional areas, not just in a silo fashion. I believe that's one of the most important differentiators is that they're willing to move across the organization into different job functions and not just try to advance in a silo fashion. So high potentials would be defined as our top talent with the ability to move into multiple positions. So we have a question here, should all high potentials also be successors? And my response is yes, virtually all the times high potentials should also be successors. Otherwise, the question becomes, well, then what are you high potential for? If we can't find anywhere in the organization where you might at least be a future successor, then how do we know what to develop you for, and what is it that you have the potential to do? Now, on the other hand, not all successors will be high potentials. You can have a lot of great successors who are willing and able to move into a specific position, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be able to move up and across into leadership roles and different job functions. So the high potential criteria is much more extensive, and the successor criteria is much more limited and focused on specific job competencies for very specific positions. You might also identify key experts in the organization, especially if you have a lot of employees who have very high competency skill sets, such as engineers, scientists, medical personnel, people who have very specific skill sets. And so these are people who have achieved a very distinguished level of expertise in their field. And you want to recognize and retain these people and also provide a career track for technical expertise rather than just focusing only on leadership track expertise and advancement. So some companies, but not all, identify key experts in order to recognize and retain these people, and also to make sure that they have succession plans in place for key experts as well as for leaders in the organization. So let's look at successor categories. The most common phrase that is used is we have ready now successors, but my perspective is to throw out the phrase ready now successors, because managers often feel that no one is ready now for my position. And so when you say, do you have any ready now successors, their response, just off the cuff is going to be, no, no one's ready for my position. And they're worried that someone might be ready for their position because they're not ready to move yet. So that kind of puts some emotion into it that we just don't need. And it's also very subjective. I'm asking a manager who's ready now for your position without really talking about what are the competencies and the qualifications for the job. So in with the phrase qualified successors instead of ready now successors. So a qualified successor is someone who would be considered qualified to interview for the position if it were open today. So they meet the job description requirements and competencies. They're at least as qualified as what I call the shiny people outside of the company. And I call them shiny people because all we know about them is their shiny resume and their shiny references that they've given us. So a lot of times we, especially business leaders, have this tendency to prefer the outside job candidate because of these shiny qualities. And we need to try to focus more on the internal candidates. We already know what they're good at. We know what they're not so good at. So we can work to really align their strengths with the best possible positions. So when we look at qualified successors, we're saying, yes, if the position were open today, they could at least be qualified to interview for the role. So it's much more specific, much more objective. And it takes away this whole issue of, well, no one's ready now for my position. And it also helps us to identify, well, what other development actions we can take to increase their readiness. So yes, maybe they're qualified for the position technically, but to get them more ready for the position, we could develop them in this specific area. So just because they're qualified doesn't mean that we can't continue to enhance their development and their readiness for the role. Here we're going to talk about future gap successors. Now the other common phrase that is used is ready 1 to 2 years successors. So what's the problem with that? The problem is next year they're also ready 1 to 2 years, and the next year they're ready 1 to 2 years, and the next year they're ready 1 to 2 years. The problem is it's not helping us in any way. It's very, very subjective, just like the ready now phrase, and it doesn't identify why are they not ready now. So instead, I would say use the phrase, some type of phrase around future or gap successors. So these are people who are close to being ready. They have most of the qualifications for the role, but they're not quite ready. So a future gap successor would have at least one qualification that is deficient and would not allow them to interview for the role if it were open today. But If we can develop that gap and address that qualification gap, then they could become a qualified successor. So, for example, here we have Bonnie, who's a future two-gap successor for the HR director role. So, to become a qualified successor, she will need to first obtain her SPHR certification, and she needs to obtain experience and confidence working with director level leaders. So, right now she's an HR manager, and per the qualifications that we have, for the HR director job role, she would have to obtain these two qualifications. So now that we know what the gaps are, her development plan could include the requirement to obtain the SPHR certification by a certain date, and then also to work on the director level project team so she can get to know the directors, become more confident working with the directors, and so forth. So now we know exactly what the gaps are for Bonnie and why she's not a qualified successor. And by the way, if Bonnie were to ask if she were ready for the HR director role, guess what? We know exactly what to say that she needs to develop to be ready for the role, which employees really like to know that. And we also have a very specific development plan for Bonnie. So this is so much better than kind of the commonly used methodology of saying Bonnie's ready 1 to 2 years. She just needs more experience and more seasoning, and then she'll be ready. We want to throw out that type of methodology, which really is just not getting us anywhere, and go towards a more specific type of succession identification process as shown here. So another question we were going to explore is what is the difference between high performers and high potentials? So everybody should be a high performer throughout their career. High performers get the job done, they achieve their results, they demonstrate employee engagement, they demonstrate the competencies and behaviors of the company, and so forth. So we should expect that everyone is a high performer. But being a high potential is more of a point in time in a high performer's career in which your abilities and your aspirations are both at peak levels. Now, it's my perception that no one is a high potential at all times throughout their career. Not everyone is going to agree on that. And that's okay because this is still a growing and shaping part of HR, and we should discuss this and have conversations about being a high potential and a high performer. But my perspective is that people move in and out of high potentialness, if that were an adjective, throughout their career because different things are going on in the company, different things are going on in their life, and so being a high potential is where kind of everything is lining up at the right time, and a person is ready for a lot of focus on development and more career movement. So top talent people could demonstrate this trait of being a high potential at multiple points throughout their career. So just like I recommended throwing out ready now successors and ready 1 to 2 years successors, there's also a high potential definition that I recommend throwing out, and that's the common definition that goes something like this. A high potential employee demonstrates the ability to be promoted 1 to 2 positions in the next 3 to 5 years. So, a lot of organizations use some type of definition that's similar to this, but we want to, I think, throw it out because it's so subjective. It doesn't give the managers, any type of criteria to go off of. It also ignores the importance of lateral moves for development. If you look at your executive team, most, if not all of them, have moved into different business functional areas before becoming in the position that they're in at this time. And why is that? It's because moving into lateral moves and taking different business function roles in the organization helps to build a broader mindset and a broader skill set, and just really increases the success of leaders. And so why would we have a high potential definition that only talks about being promoted? It actually goes against the importance of having lateral moves for development. So you could at least expand it and say a high potential demonstrates the ability to either move laterally and in promotional positions, 1 to 2 positions in the next 3 to 5 years. I actually think a differentiator between high potentials and high performers is that high potentials are willing to take lateral moves in the organization, which actually, if you think about it, is more risky for their their career because you have to learn a lot of new job functions, and you're moving outside of your comfort zone, but you're learning a lot more. So it's interesting that we have this high potential definition that only talks about being promoted when we know that lateral moves are so important for development. It also promotes this constant hunger for advancement that often doesn't exist. Most companies don't have enough positions where someone could even be promoted 1 to 2 positions in the next 3 to 5 years. So, it's really difficult to even have the positions available. And we also have emerging talent who wants to be CEO tomorrow, and we're trying to tell them, well, you need more experience and that type of thing. Well, then we wouldn't want to have a definition that only focuses on promotions because that really feeds into this hunger for advancement when again we really need the lateral movements as well. So in with having gates, which I'll talk about in a minute, and behavioral criteria, and especially the ability and desire to move laterally in the organization. So, what is a high potential? And this is in my 30-minute guide to talent and succession management. And it talks about, as I said earlier, that balance of having high aspiration, you're ready to learn, you're ready to move and shake and grow, you seek feedback, and you're self-motivated and you're highly engaged, and you want to move laterally, you might be willing to relocate, you want to take on new roles, you might even want to move globally in the organization. So your aspiration is very, very high, and along with your abilities are very high. You have the ability to step into multiple and significant leadership roles with broader scope of responsibility and challenges. You have high learning agility, creativity, and strategic thinking. Very importantly, you can work in an ambiguous and rapidly changing environment, so important in today's world. And also very importantly, you must have those superior interpersonal skills and you must be respected in the organization. You also need to have high emotional intelligence to effectively deal with stress, emotional politics, emotions, and so forth. And also very importantly, you know what your strengths are and you are able to develop or compensate for your weaknesses. So being a high potential, I believe, is when all of these things, if you call these all these stars are in alignment at the same time. Sometimes we have our aspirations are not as high as our abilities, and sometimes our abilities are not as high as our aspirations. And that's why this whole idea of being a high potential, it fluctuates in your career. When you take on a new job role in the organization, it doesn't matter how intelligent you are and how motivated you are. When you take on that new role, your aspirations and your abilities are both going to drop at that time because you have to learn something new, so your abilities are lower at that time. And because you just moved into a new role, one would assume that you're not already thinking about where is your next role, but you're wanting to focus on increasing your abilities in this current role. So that's another reason why I just don't think that anyone is a constant high potential in an organization. And therefore, if you have a high potential leadership development program, people could move in and out of this leadership program, and that kind of opens it up into so more people can move into the high potential development program and have access to these types of materials, and you can increase your talent bench strength. So earlier I talked about, having gates of high potential identification, and this would be an example here. So the first gate, not a physical gate, but kind of a starting point, would be to provide some basic criteria. So you have to be in the organization a certain period of time, so we have enough time to view your performance over an extended period of time. Maybe your performance ratings have to be a certain level, and your job grade has to be a certain level. So right up front, we're already narrowing the field a little bit as to who is eligible as a potential high potential person. And gate number 2 is people would be nominated and discussed and calibrated by the leaders in the talent review process. And then finally, the executives would review and need to approve those who are selected both as high potentials and successors. So this is an example of what I mean by creating gates of high potential identification. So, how do we better explain talent bench strength to our business leaders? This diagram is also in the 30-minute guide to talent and succession management, and it compares financial processes to people processes in the organization. So in the first row, we're talking about our money, our financial resources, and in the second row, we're talking about our talent resources. In the left-hand column, we're talking about past performance, and in the right-hand column, we're talking about predicting future resources. So now let's look at the light green box where we're looking at past performance of our financial resources. And in that box, we find things like the annual report, profit and loss reports, balance sheets, profit margin calculations. So there's all kinds of things we do in the organization to continuously review the past performance of our money. How have we done in our financial resources, and what can we learn from that as we go forward? And we give that information to our stockholders, our shareholders, our investors, and so forth, so that they can see how well the organization is doing financially. So similarly, we do this also with our people. We review past performance by having performance appraisals, performance reviews. We might have employee recognition programs. We might have mid-year reviews and discussions. Merit increases and bonuses might also go into this box. So most organizations don't spend as much time in the orange box as they do the light green box. But this is something to already look at. Why do we not spend as much systems, staff, focus of our time on looking at the past performance of our people as much as we typically do look at the financial resources in the past? So now let's look at the right-hand column comparing our processes and tools for future resource needs. And so in the darker green box, we have budgeting and sales projections, inventory, raw material purchases, and so forth. So these are all processes that we use to predict and review what do we need in the future financially and resource-wise to achieve our goals. And so how much time does your organization spend on the budgeting process? How much is that a focus in your organization? And if this were an SAT test, we could say, talent assessments, succession planning, talent reviews, and high potential identification and development, those processes are to people as budgeting is to finances. Okay, so the whole talent bench strength, all those processes and strategy, it's all about looking at what do we need for the future for our talent, just like budgeting is what do we need for the future for our money. So the question is, why is the yellow box not as big and important? Why is it typically not have as much focus in the organization? Typically budgeting, we have systems and processes and staff and reports and all kinds of things in place to support and facilitate the budgeting process. But we typically don't have as many resources and systems and staff and so forth in place for the yellow box for all the talent bench strength strategy and processes. So the question is why? Why are these boxes not all more well balanced? So you could look at this as your balance scorecard for your financial and your people processes. So now what can we learn from sports teams? The interesting thing is sports teams do a great job of talent and succession management. I think there's a lot that we can learn from that. So the first thing is looking at what is the job of a sports coach. One of their most important roles is to identify, retain, and develop top talent. So, in the sports world, we have people who are always looking for top talent, always. And we want to retain the best players, and we're constantly developing and coaching top talent. I mean, that's what they spend their time on. And all sports coaches are also responsible for identifying and developing successors. Normally we call them bench players or second string players. So they're very good about constantly developing successors to make sure that they have backup plans in place and so that they have people to move into those roles when they do lose their talent. It's amazing what we can learn from the sports world when we look at the corporate world in the field of succession planning. Additionally, it's interesting that in the sports world, they do a great job of aligning strengths with positions. So the quarterback on the football team needs to be great at throwing the ball, needs to be great at football strategy. So it would be ridiculous to say, you know what, your 360 feedback report said you're not very good at kicking the ball. So why don't you go over and practice kicking the ball? I mean, see how ridiculous that is, but yet in the corporate world, many times that's exactly what we do. So we need to be better in the corporate world of really helping people to leverage and continue to develop their strengths and aligning strengths with positions. So the question is this how your managers prioritize their time and attention? And if not, is this something where we can take a page from the sports team's book to really enhance these processes in our organization? You want to make sure that you have a balanced external and internal talent strategy. So external recruiting focuses on sourcing, interviewing, evaluating, hiring, and onboarding new talent from outside the organization. This is an important part of your talent management strategy. You want to bring in fresh ideas, you want to bring in new competencies into the organization. But becoming dependent on these external resources for talent means that you're depending on your competitors to do a better job of developing their talent than you are. Do we really want to depend on our competitors to do a better job of developing their talent than we are? And also, it means you're dependent on and hoping for a ready source of top talent, even as economic conditions might change outside of the organization. So yes, you want to have a great external talent strategy, but you don't want to be dependent on that. And when you are dependent on that, the other problem is that people in the organization see that they don't have a career path in the company, and guess what? Your turnover increases. So you want to have both an external talent acquisition strategy and an internal talent management strategy, and you want to have staff and focus and resources and systems for both talent acquisition and for internal talent management. You want these things to be balanced and you want them to be tied together. So how will a strong talent bench strength strategy save you time and money? First of all, the retention of your top talent will increase, and your talent risk management will be less of a problem. You'll have more ready talent for the organization, and you can grow the organization because you're growing your people as well. Development will be tied more to business goals and to succession plans and to career interests. And accountability will increase as the leaders more and more understand through the talent review process and succession planning that it's their job to work with their talent to develop people. You'll reduce your expenses of recruiting costs as well as the cost of onboarding and training new employees, and your time to fill and interview time for open positions will decrease as leaders are more prepared for new roles. So can we really make sure we have the right person on the right seat, on the right bus, at the right time, every time? The answer is no. I mean, I wish we could say yes, and that is our goal, but it's not going to happen every time. So we just want to make sure that everyone understands, yes, this is what we're going for, and it will happen more and more as we focus on the talent bench strength strategy. But we can significantly impact this goal and go into that direction by implementing the talent bench strength process, which is designed to gather information, review, discuss, and analyze it in order to make decisions. Just like these processes that you see here. All of these processes that are normal, if you would, in the business are designed to gather information and review and discuss and analyze the information to make better decisions. None of them are perfect, but they all increase our business success, just like talent bench strength strategies and processes. So let's look now at succession management. First of all, let's look at a scenario. Here we have Pat, who's a VP of sales. Her succession plan is this. I don't want to develop a successor who might replace me, but if I did, Hannah might be ready for my position in about 10 years. So we already see a problem where managers sometimes are reluctant to identify successors and they feel like no one is going to be ready for their position anytime soon. And then here we have Joe, who's the business owner, and here's his succession plan for Pat. So he thinks, Pat is a great sales VP and she's never going to leave me because she's loyal. So that's another problem. We think people are never going to leave. But if Pat did leave, I'll put Mike in her position. Now, another issue you see here is, so Joe thinks Mike is the successor to Pat, but Pat thinks that Hannah is a better successor for her. So we already have a disconnect here where they're thinking different things about the succession plan for Pat. So now let's look at, well, what does Hannah think about her career? So Pat thinks Hannah is going to be a good success 10 years. Well, let's see what Hannah thinks. Hannah is a business development manager, and here's her career plan. I'm going to quit this job and try out for American Idol. Okay, so this is an extreme example, but the point is, if we're not talking with employees about what they want for their career, and we're creating succession plans without talking with employees, then we're identifying successors that are never going to move into the role, and they have no desire to move into the role. So then it becomes a waste of time. It doesn't work, and when the job opens, we end up not filling it with a successor, and everyone says it doesn't work. Where if we trace it back, sometimes the problem is we just didn't tie the succession plans to what the employee wants for his or her career. So then let's look at Mike. If you remember, Mike is the one that Joe thought would be a good successor to Pat. But Mike is saying, I'm tired of sales and marketing. I've been offered an operations position at XYZ company, and I think I'll take that job. So here we have a high vacancy risk person in Mike, and we think that he's going to be the successor to Pat, when in fact we're about to lose him. And he's tired of sales and marketing. So it's just another example of, if we don't know what the employee is thinking, and if we don't talk about talent vacancy risks, then we can't really take the action to prevent the talent risk. And again, we're identifying successors that may not even be with the organization. So we want to talk about vacancy risks and what we can do to retain people, and talk with them about their career interests, and try to tie this all together. So the problem in this scenario is that no one is discussing what they're thinking. Everyone has these things in their head about the succession plans, and no one's trying to fit the pieces together to form valid and succession development plans. So we need to actually get together to discuss these succession plans, which is what the talent review meeting is all about. The other problem is no one is taking action to develop successor candidates. So, at least on the previous slide, they were trying to think about who would be a good successor candidate. But again, they're not talking with the employees about their career interests, and they're not taking any action to identify qualification gaps or to develop the successor candidates. And this is also a common problem where we put names in boxes on a succession planning sheet, and we put it on the shelf, and we hope that, when the position opens up, these people are just going to be ready for the roles. When instead, we need to actually identify the qualification gaps and develop people to increase their readiness. So good succession planning involves discussions, and it involves taking action. So what's the so what? Well, the so what is Hannah leaves the organization and she goes on American Idol, so we lose her. And even though Pat wasn't thinking about leaving, well, someone calls her and says, hey, there's a great position. Are you interested? Yep, she's gone. And then we have Mike. We already knew Mike was high vacancy risk. Well, we knew, but the managers didn't know. And he decided to take the position, so he's gone. So that leaves Joe, our owner, who is left without any talent in the organization. So that's the so what. So looking at succession management, it's a risk management business function rather than really being an HR function. It's a risk management function that just happens to be about people. It's designed to both prevent and prepare for talent loss, and it's a critical component of any organization's talent bench strength strategy. So, effective succession planning answers these questions. First of all, what does the organization need for talent going forward to achieve the goals and for our leadership positions? What does the employee want? What does each employee want for their career? Does the role align with the employee's strengths? If we're looking at a succession position, will the role align with the employee's strengths? How soon will the organization need this talent? Do we have someone who has expressed a pending retirement coming up? If so, how much time do we have to prepare someone for the position? Is the employee ready for the successor position? Are they fully qualified, or are there qualification gaps? And how can we better address their readiness and take development actions to increase their readiness? We also want to move beyond basic replacement planning when we're doing succession management. So we want to look at the new goals that are coming up in the organization. Do we need new leaders to achieve those goals? Do the current leaders and employees have the skill sets to achieve the goals? Is the organization in a growth mode, or are we shrinking or changing? Are we opening new facilities? Are we expanding globally? What is happening in the organization, and where will we need new leaders and employees? And what kind of vacancy risks do we have? What is our retirement situation? Do we have high turnover? Do we have some people with high vacancy risks? Do we currently have some open leadership positions to be filled with successors? So these are some other questions to look at when you're doing succession planning to move beyond basic replacement planning. Earlier, we discussed the idea of identifying qualified successors, people who are fully qualified today to interview for the position if it were open today. And we discussed future successors with one or two qualification gaps. If you like, you could also identify pipeline candidates who are less ready than the future successors. They have 3 or more qualification gaps. However, this can make the process more cumbersome, so it's something to be careful about unless it's important to you to have people who are farther down in the pipeline to be ready for positions. You can also certainly put external candidates on your succession plan, and it's also a good idea to have emergency plans in place in case of a sudden departure or a short-term leave of absence for your leaders. Earlier, we also discussed what is a talent pool. It's a group of successor candidates who share the same abilities and the desire to move into a similar leadership role. For example, rather than creating 12 separate succession plans for 12 regional director positions, create a talent pool of regional director candidates. You can also identify critical positions in the organization, which actually has nothing to do with who is in the position. This example is from my book, The Talent Review Meeting Facilitator's Guide. So when you're asking leaders to identify critical positions, you just want to give them a simple tool that helps them to objectively identify critical positions based on the business impact level of the position. How hard is it to recruit for the position? Do we have internal successors, yes or no? How high is the cost of recruiting for that position, and what kind of vacancy risk do we already have for employees in that position? These would be examples of ways to identify the most critical positions. And some organizations do this in order to focus their succession planning activities on just those critical positions. Some key bench strength tools will be discussed in this section. The talent review meeting is a way to increase visibility of talent in the organization and to greatly increase the validity of 9-box placement, talent development plans, succession planning, and so forth. So this is in the 30-minute guide to talent and succession management on page 31. And here are some agenda items that are often discussed in talent review meetings: succession plans, high potential nominations, development actions, short and long-term career plans, business goals, and what talent will we need to achieve the business goals, talent profile information, talent vacancy risk and action plans, and the strengths and development needs of our talent. Here we see major talent bench strength core elements, with the centerpiece being the talent review meeting, where the leaders get together to discuss succession plans and talent and key experts, high potentials, and development plans. So how would those elements change based on the strategic business needs of the organization and what the talent situation is in the organization. In this example, we're looking at how the elements would change in an organization with a large percentage of pending retirements. So in that situation, we want to focus on critical positions, succession plans, and development plans to make sure that we are going to be ready to fill positions for those pending retirement situations. In contrast, here we have an organization with a large number of managers in similar positions, which is growing. So, for example, a retail operation with a large number of store managers and regional managers. In this situation, it would be a good idea to focus instead on creating talent pools of store manager employees who could be developed for those roles, people who can be developed in talent pools, and training programs for regional managers and so forth. And so we want to focus on those talent pools and the development plans, as well as maybe some high potential development programs. And then in this organization, we have a large number of employees with expertise level competencies, such as maybe scientists and engineers, medical personnel. So we might want to focus here also on critical positions and key expert programs and succession plans for our key experts and development programs where the key experts and people in critical positions can make sure we have good succession plans and can mentor others in the organization. So these are just examples of how these components would need to change, and you would have a different focus in your talent bench strength strategy depending on your business situation. So it's not a one size fits all. First, we have to look at what are the business needs of the organization, what are the talent pain points, which positions are the most difficult to fill, and are we growing, are we shrinking, are we changing? So we need to look at that first and then identify which components of our strategy that we need to focus on first. This is just a simple methodology to show how can we better identify successors. So here we're looking at the competencies for a job of knowledge, skills, and abilities for a position. And then we've identified, by placing the initials of the employees, we've identified which employees have these competencies. Well, we can see here that KJ, maybe that's Karen Jones, has all of the competencies for the position that we're looking at. And that would be she needs more skills, and she needs to learn how to hire and coach and develop people. And she also has never done the budgeting process. So she's currently missing those two competencies. So we could say that KJ is a 2-gap successor candidate. And development plans this year include participating in the budget process and attending management training and hopefully serving in some type of formal or informal manager role, such as being a project manager or maybe mentoring a new employee, that type of thing. So here is an example of a methodology that's very simple to use. It's effective, and we can identify successor candidates, and we can develop actions to address their gaps. This is a simple tool as well that almost everyone uses as part of the talent review and succession process, and that is to have up-to-date talent profiles for individuals in the organization, so we can keep up to date with their competencies and their degrees and certifications and their skills. So if you think about it, normally without a talent profile, the only time someone looks at your resume and discusses with you your past experiences is when you're hired. And when people are in the organization for many years, we forget the job competencies that they bring to the table, and we forget maybe things that they've done in the past that might lead to future roles in the organization. So this is something we want to keep up to date with, and we want to refresh our memories every year as to what strengths and also development areas does this person bring into the organization. And we always have to discuss the question about photos and the talent profiles. My personal opinion is it's important to have the photos on the profile to make sure everyone is talking about the same person, especially in a large organization. But this is just a decision that you'll need to make. Where it says the blue book on this slide, it's talking about the Talent Review Meeting Facilitator Guide, and this is on page 62 of that book. This is a classic 9-box chart, and it's shown in the 30-minute guide on page 30. And this is what I call the classic 9-box chart, and I've seen all kinds of variations of this 9-box chart. This is often used before, during, and sometimes even after the talent review meeting to identify the placement of employees as far as their potential and their performance. Now, I recently created a new type of 9-box chart called the talent bench strength chart, which is shown on the next slide. This is a talent bench strength guide, and over the years I've seen issues with the classic 9-box guide, and I wanted to make something that was less emotional and led us more to career and development actions. And it also shows you that no one should stay in the top right hand box for a long time. So on the previous slide, we had the box that is the high potential, high performing person in the upper right hand corner. And many times it seems that managers are trying to get everybody in the top right hand box. But the truth is, if someone's in the top right hand box for a long time, meaning that their abilities are high and their aspirations are high, that means they're ready for something new. They are urgently ready for something new. We've got to find them a new challenge some way, somehow. All right, and so people would not stay in that box for a long time, or else we might chance leaving the organization. And also our successor candidates would come from typically the top 4 right-hand boxes. But we also value people in the lavender colored boxes who are key experts and have solid abilities. These are people who really contribute to the organization, and yes, maybe their aspirations are not high at this time, but they're really getting the job done. They can mentor and coach others, and they really get the results for the organization. And then people in the bottom row, we have some type of ability issue, and so we want to really address those issues, whether it's a job fit issue or some type of development issue. This slide talks more about how to use the guide. You will want to address the issue of what do we do with new employees. If they've been with the organization, let's say less than 6 months, typically we don't place them on the talent bench strength guide. We don't have enough data yet to evaluate both their ability and aspiration. So this slide simply talks more about how to use the talent bench strength guide. This is an example of using metrics to help show leaders the cost of the leadership risk of leaving. So in this example, during the talent review process, we identified a total of 84 leaders in the organization who were at moderate or high risk of leaving for a variety of issues. And so that could be 84 leaders leaving over the next 12 months. Well, now, if you can find out from your recruiting manager what is the average cost of hiring a leader from outside the organization, you can multiply the 84 leaders times that amount, and that could be your risk cost, potential costs coming up in the next 12 months of having to replace those leaders outside the company if you don't have any internal successors. So putting something like this together can help show the leaders, this is the risk that we have. This is not just a nice thing to do, but this is the leadership risk that we have, and here's how much it could cost us, and here's what we can do about it. We can put together a talent review and succession planning process to have more internal candidates develop for these positions and reduce our external recruiting costs. So I thank you for participating in this presentation, and I do have workshops coming up in London in September and also in Dallas in September, and this is a 2-day HRCI pre-approved workshop. It's very practical. All the ideas that we talked about here in this presentation will be explored with methodologies and templates and all kinds of practice exercises in the workshop. So I hope to see you there. I also hope that you'll join our LinkedIn group, which is Succession Management Professionals. We now have over 3,000 global professionals in our group, and we have good discussions and resources available to those who conduct talent review meetings and succession planning. Please feel free to contact me at doris@successionconsultant.com and look at my books and other talent review and succession resources at www.successionconsultant.com. Thank you so much.